Well, not too bad.
Are you starting the chair slides? Oh, you already have them up. How do you control it?
I just do this.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome in the city of brotherly love, the place that is always sunny, Philadelphia. Also, a warm welcome to our remote participants. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to attend this session, even if this time zone perhaps is not optimal for you. Today's working group session is the GROW session. This is the Global Routing Operations Working Group who concern themselves with the stability of the internet routing system as deployed across this planet. A phenomenal achievement, despite our best efforts. Now, co-chair, would you be so kind to jump to the agenda?
Yes. Oh, get through this first.
A note well applies. This is the fine print that outlines your obligations as IETF participant. Of special note is a desire for everybody to interact with each other in a respectful manner. I also want to highlight that it's mandatory to wear masks during this session in this room. I see at least one person not wearing a mask, so I would kindly ask you to put on a mask. Much appreciated for your collaboration, and let's hope that maybe in a few years masks are not a requirement anymore. The note well can be downloaded if you want to read the unreadable letters. There's various links that apply to this working group session and the working group in general. Again, the materials are on the data tracker, so if you want to read all of this in more detail, please download the materials and follow all these links to resources. Our agenda for today, we need to dive through some administrative, how do you even pronounce that word?
Administrivia.
Administrivia, all right. The blue sheets used to be a paper device that was passed around the room, but nowadays it's a QR code that you can scan on this screen. If you whip up your phone, scan the QR code, and then log in with your data tracker URI, the system will register your presence in this meeting, which has purposes in mostly the legal realm. So please scan the QR code to declare your presence in this working group session. We're going to need a minutes taker and Jabber scribe. Do we need to appoint a volunteer? Richard Patterson, would you be so gracious to honor us with minute taking? And Warren Kumari volunteers to do Jabber.
You can either do it in the whatchamacallit, or just send a file and email it to it later. Thank you.
Any plain text document is fine. Excellent. Agenda bashing. We have 2 items today. Actually, 3, because we also should discuss the state of various working group documents. But after that, we'll move on to an item called the well-known BGP Anycast community, or well-known Anycast BGP community. And then more work on BMP and Yang. So is there any things that people would like to add to the agenda? Maybe Ben Madison with CBOR?
Ben Madison, Work Online. I'm not sure that the thing that you are referring to is quite ready to be discussed here, given that there are authors who I probably need to discuss it with first.
All right. Then we'll see more of this at IETF114, hopefully. Document status. Do you want to cover that, Chris? Nope. Nope. From the top of my head, the BMP TLV EBIT draft was approved for working group adoption some time ago, but unfortunately, it fell off my radar, and I approved it as recently as this week. So that's now in the system as working group document. Another document that got approved today for working group adoption is the work on NRTM version 4, the near real-time monitoring protocol. A new renamed document has not yet been uploaded, but be on the lookout for that one. And I see I have to do some work. The GROW BMP TLV document needs a write-up from the chairs, and I will do that in the next few days. And I'm hoping Paulo will remind me to actually do it in the next few days. Thank you, Paulo. Okay, with that, I would say let's move on to a remote presentation by Maximilian Wilhelm, the Anycast community. I will now transfer presentation rights to all the slots for the requested. Oh, you have to pass it. So Maximilian, what we're now doing in the system is making you the presenter, and that should allow you to click through the slides. And we can see you on the screen. We see you waving. There is no audio yet. Can you...
Wait, I clicked on mistake. Sorry.
All right, let's try again.
Okay. Is it me or is it you?
It was us. My apologies. We can hear
Cool.
you loud and clear. That's good news.
So now you should be able to see me again.
Yes.
And I accept to what do I do? I guess this one.
And we
so
see the first
I
slide.
see the slides and you see them too, I guess, right?
Yep. Take it away, Maximilian.
Cool. Thank you. Good evening to Philadelphia. So I put a forward, or we, Freddie is also present in the audience, put a draft forward to define a well-known BGP community to denote prefixes are used for Anycast. And we want to say what we thought, what is the reason behind it. So short motivation, who am I? Networker, open source hacker, work for Cloudflare, who also are sponsoring this. You can find me on Twitter or reach out via mail. So why did we do that? So assume a Swiss ISP who has international network, intercontinental network, and for example, wants to transport packets to the US directly. So would like to prefer the own path via own equipment over the pond, but would also like to route Anycast prefixes locally because of the nature of Anycast. For a lot of providers having different POPs around the world, usually the hot potato path would be best. And given many providers also use DNS Anycast and then point customers or clients to the preferred servers. This might influence user latency and experience in general. So then we came up with the idea, okay, if we could denote prefixes are used for any cast, that would help people to do better informed routing decisions. So the idea is to specify a well-known BGP community to do that. So not everyone or every provider has to define a different one, and TE gets messy. That's basically the idea. And the proposed solution is, as I said, define a well-known BGP community. We will ask operators who want to denote their prefixes are used for any cast to either specify it on all places or in none. So it does not make total sense to only specify it in a few places. And the idea is, if this is specified, we ask people to use hot potato routing for it, but that's in everyone's best judgment. As was pointed out on the mailing list, this might have influences on route server operators, which may introduce an option to filter for any cast prefixes, to take that into consideration when doing TE. And this also, what also brought up on the mailing list, this might influence your network when doing route reflection. Optimal route reflection was brought into the mix, as well as add paths. I'd say we let it to operators to define the best path forward there. I think it would not be good to prescribe a solution. And that's basically the idea. The draft has been put forward. It's in version 01. It's all out there on the list. And we are open to your feedback. That's basically it. Thank you.
And with that, we open up the floor for discussion, and I hope there will be some sharing of perspectives on this topic, because the implications must be thoroughly understood. I see somebody at the mic.
Hey, Kevin Patel, Arcus. Nice draft. Quick question. Do you think it makes sense to use large community and append ASS also to talk about what Anycast community, if any, you're doing, or you rather prefer this to be on a generic community?
Just broke. Okay, audio seems to be back. I think I got most of the question. We thought about using large communities, but I guess people in this audience can answer the question if it's a good idea to use them today better. I was afraid that there still might be systems out there which do not implement large communities. I don't know about that. That's why the idea was to go for classical communities. And I believe part of the question was to entail the AS, which is sending this into the community, which somehow would defeat the point of only having one community to filter against.
Ben Madison, Work Online. Thanks for the draft. I think it's an interesting problem space. I think that there's a kind of a tension between the engineering problem you're trying to solve and the social reality that it exists in. Speaking for myself and the network that I operate, I wouldn't allow any third-party network to send me hints that alters my local routing policy without a substantial degree of trust in the person who is sending it. And it seems to me that because that mechanism requires some degree of social interaction, whether it's kind of like remotely over email or forums like this or NOGs or peering forums or whatever, the fact that that trust needs to be established anyway means that there's plenty of opportunity to exchange operator-specific communities during those conversations and those relationships anyway. So I think that you end up kind of losing the benefits of having a single well-known community with universal semantics, because you've got to do all of that social networking work to make it useful anyway, to make it trustworthy. And so I wonder how useful this ends up being in practice.
Fair point. The security side of this, or the aspect, has been brought up on the mailing list also. I'd say in combination with RPKI, it should be okay to filter on community and AS or community and prefix list potentially. But I still see the point. So you should think about what you are doing when you implement that.
I would like to live in a world in which RPKI could help with this, but that's not a world that we live in currently. Trying to secure communities is a hard problem.
Hi there, Tom Hill from BT. The all or nothing solution as a proposal is interesting, even as a should rather than a must. I can see that going very wrong on the basis that either there are transient issues or perhaps even folks who aren't paying enough attention, maybe. So is there a way in which you envision we may track hygiene of prefixes announced with this particular community and, you know, make the owners of the prefix aware that they've perhaps not done this in a all or nothing fashion? Otherwise, I feel like we stand to be in a situation where that's very easily going to become quite a mess, if past experience is anything to go by.
I see your point. Given that I got shamed on Twitter a while back for doing a route leak, I know these solutions exist and can be built. So I guess going on route information services, etc., this should be possible.
So you suggest that the current routing leak detection services or apparatus be extended to point out when the Anycast community is not in an all or nothing fashion, advertised in an all or nothing fashion?
I guess suggest would be a strong word for my taste, but what I guess would be a good idea for operators who want to go down this path and announce their prefixes with this, we could ask them to monitor it given route views, RIS, or etc. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to ask them, yes, definitely.
You don't seem convinced.
Jeff, I'm mostly here to remind this working group and my esteemed co-chair of IDR, there is no such thing as a well-known large community. Stop trying to do that.
Well, K. Patel Arcus here again, for one more time. That was precisely what I was trying to indicate, that while there is not one, you could probably define one and get away. I have a feeling that you do want to tell your neighbor ASs, even when you are sending out the well-known communities, to tag at least and say which ASs that these are propagating from or originating from, and you're appending it and so forth and so on.
But don't we know that by looking at the AS path?
To interject here, from the AS path, you don't know which of the ASNs in the AS path attached the well-known 1997 community, but there is no large communities registry for this type of functionality. So it would be good to have a discussion on the mailing list whether a extended community that has room for the sender ASN or setter of the community. But opinions differ on whether extended communities are useful in this type of work environment. So that's why I would discuss it on the mailing list to see what comes out of the woodworks. Rudiger, you're actually last in line. First, we got to go to Linda Dunbar. Linda?
Yes. Maybe this question is for the group. So I'm wondering, like, since the anycast used so widely, can anycast being treated like a multicast, like all the ports belong to the anycast, register for that, so that the network know how to forward instead of putting to the extended community? Just a question.
I'm sorry, I didn't think I heard your question. Would you mind typing down the question in the chat to overcome potential audio issues?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
In the meantime, we'll jump to David.
David Lamparter. As an implementer with little clue, I have a question about the trust relationship brought up earlier. Isn't this really two separate things? One being the advertisement in a permissive way and informative way about tagging something as an anycast prefix versus having an expectation of something happening due to that. Like, I understand that the latter is something that will rely on relationships like that, but I don't need a relationship to make use of this to just flag things that I'm advertising.
Sorry, Rudiger. Yeah, that's totally true. And from reading the draft, it doesn't sound like there was an expectation that this would be useful just as an FYI. But if it is useful just as an FYI, then sure, then it's absolutely fine. My concern was that if there's an expectation that people will actually, blindly or semi-blindly act on this in the routing policies, I think that's a mistaken assumption.
Agree.
Next up, Mr. Volk.
Thank you. Just comment, yes, large community space has not yet assigned any parts of the namespace for special purposes, but the space is large and interesting things could be done. And in my not so humble opinion, probably should. It is quite clear that the attachment of communities can be manipulated by any AS on the path. No question about that. But my guess is that the assumption for anycast tagging would be that every time exactly the originating AS would do the tagging, kind of that some intermediate AS has the knowledge that, yes, well, okay, this transiting announcement is anycast and not getting the signal from the first place looks a little bit strange.
So,
one second. Can the people using the floor microphone not only speak into the microphone, but also speak a little bit louder, because remote participants are telling us that the signal is a bit low. And if there are meet echo people on the link, oh, you have.
Chris is wandering around and poking at stuff, so I'll carry on talking until, how's that? Okay, perfect.
Is this better, Rob Austin?
Hello, Rob Austin. How's this for
right.
volume? Excellent. So, Warren Kamari with no hats. So, I mean, networks kind of generally decide if they want to do hot potato or not, and that's a decision that they make. There's nothing here that actually stops me from just applying this to any old route that I feel like. So if I send you 500 routes, I can tag 499 of them with this, or I could tag one. And it seems like I can choose whatever routing policy I would like with this. If instead of this being called sort of the any cost BGP community, it was like, I wish you to use a different routing policy community, it feels like that might be a better sales pitch, right? Like, this isn't specifically for any cost. This is, please use your non-standard policy for this prefix.
The intention was to use it for any cast so people can make better informed decisions on what approach to take.
Ben Madison again. Just on the subject of whether it's helpful for there to be a for the AS that's attaching the community to the prefix, which is probably the origin, being encoded in the community. I think that kind of assumes that this is useful more than one hop away. And my already limited inclination to change routing policy based on this kind of a community would fall off an exponential cliff with every additional AS hop in the path. So I think that if this is useful at all, I'd be amazed if it's useful more than a single hop away, personally. So I think that rather loses its utility. Again, if it's not just being used for informational purposes. If it's purely informational, then sure, that's additional signal, and signal is good.
Thank you. Next up, a remote participant, Freddie Kunsler, if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly.
Well, sort of. It's actually Kunsler, but that's okay. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I'm one of the proposer, and actually Maximilian wrote everything, but I could probably give the idea why it came up. We, being the Swiss ISP Maximilian was talking about, and some years back we were selling transit, I think it was in Frankfurt, to a network which was selling transit somewhere to networks somewhere in the Middle East. I think it was Iran. And they were transiting quite a lot of, announcing quite a lot of prefixes, and one was actually one of these DNS Anycast servers. I forgot which one, but what happened then when you sell transit, you usually do them higher local pref than peering or for upstream. So our users, our broadband customers in Switzerland, they were actually then using the DNS Anycast server in the Middle East somewhere with high latency, etc., etc. If we would have known that that specific prefix is actually an Anycast prefix, we would have filtered that away from the transit. And so we learned it the hard way. But if those Anycast operators would actually denote their Anycast prefixes, it just would make my life a lot easier. And the quality of the service we provide to the end customer would increase. Of course, it could be abused, but usually the Anycast operators, they know what they're doing, so we could expect some more clue of Anycast operators than sort of normal operators, and that is basically why I ask everyone to support this proposal.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? I think there's still some discussion to be had about this on the list. Oh, go. Are you getting up to ask? No? Nope. Okay. I think the next presenter is trying to move to the mic. Okay. So I think
I guess a valid question at this point in time is, do we want to work on the Anycast community as a working group document?
think that's a question for the list, yeah. That's what I meant.
And a final comment, I think the current draft doesn't really define what anycast means in this context. So it would be good to add a paragraph clarifying a term that amongst network operators is pretty well understood, but for the purpose of the IETF Internet Draft, it would be helpful to explain what anycast means in this context. And with that, we jump to BMP and Yang.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maximilian.
So hello, I'm Camilo Cardona for NTT.
You have to actually point it kind of directly at your mouth. And, yeah.
I got this here.
That's right. You can do that. Just hold it.
Okay. So Camilo Cardona from NTT, and I'm going to give an update into the BMP YAN module draft. So next, please. So we added a few things to the connection to the station. One of them was we specifically had a choice now to connect to the station via active or passive. So I do not know how many people use passive in real life, but it's included in the BMP specification. So we added that. It does add to the complexity of the model, but it is what it is. We added maximum segment size, keep alives, and session security. Session security, we basically copied it from the BGP draft model. Jeff pointed us out some hits. So we will probably take a look at that again and see if it fits on the BMP one and how to do it. The keep alive, we copied it from the TCPM module 2. I don't know if it's going to fit perfectly, so we'll take a look at that again. And there it is. So we also added network instance to the BMP sources. So Jeff always points out these things. So he pointed out that we were missing that, and now we added them. And I'll talk about that in a second. Can you go again? In the draft per se, we basically changed a few sentences and added an example. We probably need to add more examples in the future. I really like examples when you're reading models, but that's for the future. Okay, so I wanted to explain this again. So it will be nice, awesome that we could get all the information in the world from these routers, but it is bad in the wire, it is bad for the collection, and for analyzing, we don't have process for that. So the idea that we have on this draft is that you, as an operator, can specify clearly what information you want, and that we do it flexibly, but also with no ambiguity, and I mean, in a precise way. So right now we have four areas that we use to specify the data. One of them is network instances that we didn't have previously. So the idea here is that you specify from which network instance you want to get data from. And we added an identity called BMPN types only IDTI that allows you to specify that you want the data from all network instances. Remotes, well, the typical remotes from BMP, has been in pre and post, has been out pre and post, and local RIP. Here, there are no shortcuts. You have to be explicit on what you want. The same for address families. We take the address families values from the BGP YAN module. So we'll see how the two interplay, but we take it from there. And on peers, which is, well, this one is a bit more complicated. So you can specify, of course, peers individually based on their IP address and using the BGP module. But you can also specify the type of peers that you want your data from, and we are doing it right now with the BGP module. We might change that later. So you can say, for instance, give me all the data from our external peers, which is something that we see very often. That you don't want to specify, you don't want to get internal peers, you want your external, but you don't want to take them one by one. So we added that. Of course, if you want all peers, then we also have an identity for that. We changed that from the previous draft. Benoit and Jeff mentioned that. Oh. Okay, next one, please. So here's a brief example of how you configure these BMP sources. So for instance, here, we want the data from the global network instance, as been pre, from the IPv4 address family, and we want that for all external peers. So in red is those points. I apologize for the XML. This is what it is. Okay. So some gaps we haven't introduced initiation delay and backup times, which was an observation from Tim Evans. We just haven't done it, but we haven't forgotten it yet. And I'd first like to thank Jimmy Chen. I'm sorry I mispronounced his name. We had a very nice discussion about how to, about all of this that we just discussed about BMP sources and being able to filter the information, the data they really want to send to the collector. He actually went a bit further, and he told us that he actually needed to filter prefixes, and he actually told us we could use a specific model that allows you to basically specify a simple routing policy for that. So we're still processing that, but it was an amazing conversation, and right now we can just thank him. We were a bit ambiguous last time. We had even done some discussion in the mailing list, and it was not clear. So now, I mean, we'll just like to make it clear. Is this good for working group adoption? We can take it to the mailing list, but we can also discuss it here a bit. And that's it. Any more feedback? Please let me know.
What toolchain do you use to compile the Yang?
To compile it, or to validate it, or to validate it, PyYang. PyYang and some Cisco tool that, for the example, for validating the example, I use some Cisco tool that is free. I don't remember the name. SDNSS stuff. Yeah.
I'm asking because I believe this would be the first Yang work in the GROW working group, and there, at least speaking for myself, is a bit of a lack of familiarity with the various tools to interact with Yang models in internet drafts. Are there any questions from the working group?
Ben Madison, thank you for doing this. I think this is really useful. I think this is one of those areas where interacting via a mailing list or providing useful comments in a meeting like this is difficult. Is this work available somewhere like GitHub or a similar service? And if so, is that all kind of linked together from Data Tracker so that it's easy to find? Because I think that's going to be where useful contributions happen.
Yeah, we don't have it. We have it yet public, but we will do it. And of course, there as other IETF models have been discussed, we can make them public yet. Yes,
Great. Thank you.
That's the idea.
Hello, Warren Kamari, more of a comment than a question. There is also the IETF Yang doctors who are available to help with sort of consulting and things like that on this. So if the working group wants to sort of get more experience or understand how it works, I think they'd be happy to help.
Hello, Tom Hill. I believe that there has been a suggestion within NetMod to collate, to try and group together and bring together all of the distributed Yang models that are developed in different working groups into the same NetMod working group GitHub repository. It's worth having a chat with the chairs of NetMod / the AD for NetMod, Rob Wilton, about that.
Of course, that makes a lot of sense. And we will be also very happy to do it after it gets working group adoption, because I guess that officializes the whole thing, right? More than just make it like personal contribution.
All right, we'll launch a mail thread to discuss working group adoption of this work and then assess consensus on how to proceed. I see the queue is empty, both virtually and physically. So I think you are done. Thank you for your presentation, much appreciated. And I think with that, we can wrap up this IETF meeting's GROW session. We are giving you back 20 minutes of your life. And I hope to see all of you at IETF 114 in London. London is on a different continent than the Londons that are available.
It's not on the continent.
All right. Thank you all for attending this meeting, and until next time, have a good day. It's not on the